Something just happened with the Cleveland Browns, and most people completely missed it. Because this wasn't a report, it wasn't a leak, and it definitely wasn't media speculation. This came directly from the team. Out of nowhere, the Browns started pushing Shedeur Sanders heavy on their official pages, highlighting his journey, his story, his rise, almost like they're preparing fans for something bigger. And here's the part that has everyone talking: they're not doing this for any other quarterback. No hype around Deshaun Watson, no spotlight on anyone else in the room. Just Shedeur. Now that might not sound like a big deal at first, but in the NFL, teams don't move like this by accident. Every post, every video, every message, it's calculated, it's intentional. And fans are starting to connect the dots. Because when a franchise begins to shift its entire focus toward one player like this, it usually means one thing: a decision has already been made behind the scenes. Now, nothing has been officially confirmed yet, but there's growing buzz online, with people speculating that the Browns might be quietly preparing Shedeur Sanders to take over as QB1 sooner than expected. And if that's true, then everything we thought about Cleveland's quarterback situation might be completely wrong. Because this isn't just about hype anymore. This feels like the beginning of a takeover. It started with something subtle, but once you notice it, you can't unsee it. The Cleveland Browns didn't make a big announcement, no press conference, no headline saying "this is our guy." Instead, they let their social media do the talking. Out of nowhere, the team dropped a full feature on Shedeur Sanders, highlighting his entire journey, from his early days playing under his father to Jackson State to Colorado and now the NFL. It wasn't just a highlight clip either, it felt like a story being told. And that's what caught people off guard. Because teams don't usually invest that kind of attention into just any player, especially not casually. This wasn't random content, it was polished, intentional, almost like they were introducing him to the fanbase all over again, but this time in a much bigger role. And here, where it gets even more interesting. While all of this was happening, there was complete silence around every other quarterback on the roster. No hype posts, no spotlight features, no QB competition energy. Just Shedeur. Now, to be fair, teams post content all the time, but fans started asking a simple question: why him and why now? Because timing matters. This didn't happen in the middle of a quiet offseason. It came at a moment when the quarterback situation is still technically open. And instead of spreading attention evenly, the Browns focused it all in one direction. That doesn't feel accidental. In today's NFL, social media is part of the strategy. It shapes narratives, it prepares fans, it sets expectations before anything is officially said. And when a team leans this heavily into one player, it usually means they're trying to send a message without actually saying it out loud. Now, nothing has been confirmed. The Browns haven't publicly named Shedeur Sanders QB1. But this kind of move, it doesn't need confirmation to raise eyebrows. Because if you read between the lines, it starts to look like a soft rollout. Like the organization is slowly getting everyone comfortable with the idea before making it official. And once fans started piecing that together, the conversation shifted fast. Because this wasn't just content anymore. It felt like a signal. And if that signal means what people think it means, then the Browns may have already made one of the biggest decisions of their season, and they're just waiting for the right moment to fully reveal it. But here, what really made people stop and look twice, it wasn't just what the Browns were doing. It was what they weren't doing. Because while Shedeur Sanders was getting all this attention, something felt off. There was complete silence around every other quarterback in the room. No updates, no hype, no push. And in the NFL, silence can be louder than anything. Think about it. This is a team that still technically has multiple options at quarterback. Names that, under normal circumstances, would be part of the conversation. You'd expect competition talk, training camp battles, at least some kind of balance in how players are being presented. But instead, nothing. No real spotlight on Deshaun Watson, no energy around potential competition, no signs that the Browns are even entertaining another direction publicly. And that's where the speculation starts building. Because when a team goes quiet like that, especially at such an important position, it usually means one of two things. Either they're completely unsure what they're doing, or they already know exactly what they're doing and just aren't ready to say it yet. Now, based on how they're moving with Shedeur, a lot of fans are leaning toward that second option. There's been growing buzz online with people suggesting that Cleveland may have already made their internal decision, not officially announced, not confirmed, but decided behind closed doors. And if that's true, then this quiet phase around other quarterbacks isn't random, it's strategic. Because the easiest way to shift a narrative isn't always to argue it. Sometimes you just stop feeding the other side. No mentions, no updates, no momentum. Eventually, the focus naturally moves where you want it to go. And right now, all of that focus is landing on one name: Shedeur Sanders. Now again, nothing has been confirmed by the team. This is all based on patterns, timing, and what fans are picking up on. But in today's NFL, those patterns matter. Because teams rarely move this deliberately without a reason. And when you combine the heavy push behind Shedeur with the complete absence of noise around everyone else, it starts to feel less like coincidence and more like a transition already in progress. And if that's the case, then Cleveland might not be debating their QB future anymore. They might have already chosen it. And this is where the story takes a completely different turn, because Shedeur Sanders' rise wasn't supposed to look like this. In fact, if you go back just a short time ago, the narrative around him was completely different. Coming into the league, there was hype, no question, but there was also doubt. A lot of people questioned whether his success was tied too closely to his father's system. Others believed the spotlight was bigger than the actual results. And then the draft happened. It didn't go the way many expected. His name didn't come off the board early, teams passed, conversations started shifting, and for a moment it felt like his stock had taken a hit. But that's where things quietly changed. Instead of letting that moment define him, Shedeur stepped into the league with something to prove. And even in limited opportunities, there were flashes: composure, confidence, control, the kind of traits that don't always show up in stat sheets but stand out to people watching closely. And the Browns noticed. Because while others were still debating his ceiling, Cleveland seemed more interested in something else: his presence. The way he carries himself, the way he handles pressure, the way he commands attention without forcing it. That matters at the quarterback position. And here's what makes his situation unique. Shedeur isn't just another young QB trying to find his place. He came into the league already under a microscope. The expectations, the comparisons, the constant attention, it's been there from day one. Some players struggle with that. He leaned into it. And now that same spotlight that once created pressure is starting to work in his favor. Because the Browns aren't just developing a player, they're building around a story. The underdog who wasn't picked where people expected, the quarterback who had to hear the noise, the player who kept showing up anyway. That's something fans connect with. And that's exactly why this moment feels bigger than just football. Because if Shedeur really is stepping into that QB1 role, then this isn't just a depth chart change. It's the start of a completely new chapter for the franchise. And the craziest part, this might only be the beginning of what he's capable of showing. But here, where the conversation gets real, because hype is one thing, but expectations, that's a completely different story. If Shedeur Sanders is really stepping into that QB1 role, then the question isn't just can he play. It's what should success actually look like. And this is where a lot of people get it wrong. Because when fans hear franchise quarterback, they immediately think elite numbers, Pro Bowl stats, highlight plays every week. But historically, that's not how this works, especially for quarterbacks coming from later rounds or unconventional paths. Year 2 isn't about dominance. It's about proof. There's been a lot of discussion around quarterbacks in similar situations, guys who didn't come in as guaranteed stars but got their opportunity early. And when you look at those patterns, something interesting shows up. The baseline for success is actually pretty simple. We're talking about a quarterback who can run the offense efficiently, complete around the mid-60% range, throw for roughly 3,000 yards over a full season, keep touchdowns solid while limiting mistakes. Nothing crazy, just stability. And that alone would be a huge win for Cleveland. Because if Shedeur hits that level, it changes everything. It means the offense is functional. It means drives are sustained. It means the team can finally build with a quarterback instead of constantly searching for one. That's the floor. But here where it gets interesting. That's not his ceiling. Because the way the Browns are moving right now, it doesn't look like they're preparing for average. It looks like they're preparing for something bigger. And that's what makes this situation so intriguing. Because if Shedeur simply meets the baseline, the Browns become competitive. But if he goes beyond that, if he starts turning those flashes into consistency, then you're looking at something completely different. Now you're talking about a breakout. And those are the moments that shift entire franchises. Of course, none of this is guaranteed. There are still questions, still unknowns, still adjustments he has to make at the NFL level. But the key takeaway: he doesn't need to be perfect right away. He just needs to prove he belongs. And if he does that, then everything the Browns are hinting at right now starts to make a lot more sense. But here's the part nobody can ignore. Cleveland isn't just sitting back and hoping he develops. They're already making moves. And this is where things stop looking like a coincidence and start looking like a full-on plan. Because while everyone is debating whether Shedeur Sanders might be QB1, the Browns are already moving like he is. You can see it in the way they're shaping the roster. Quietly but very intentionally, Cleveland has been making moves that suggest they're building an offense designed for a young quarterback to succeed, not just survive, but actually thrive. And that starts up front. There's been a clear focus on improving protection. Because if you're going to invest in a developing QB, the first thing you do is make sure he's not running for his life every snap. Better blocking doesn't just help the run game, it gives a quarterback time to think, to read, to grow. And that's crucial in year 2. But it doesn't stop there. There's also growing buzz, again, nothing officially confirmed, that the Browns are looking to stack more weapons around him. Wide receivers, tight ends, playmakers who can create separation and make life easier for a quarterback still finding his rhythm. Because here's the truth. Young quarterbacks don't develop in isolation. They develop when the system around them works. And right now, it feels like Cleveland understands that. They're not waiting to see if Shedeur becomes the guy, they're preparing as if he already is. And that's a big difference. Because when a team starts aligning its roster, its strategy, and even its messaging around one player, it shows belief, real belief. The kind that goes beyond public statements and shows up in actual decisions. Now, of course, this doesn't guarantee success. Plenty of teams have tried to build around young quarterbacks and missed. It happens all the time, but what makes this situation stand out is how early it's happening. Usually teams wait. They hesitate. They want more proof. But Cleveland, they're moving ahead anyway. And that tells you everything you need to know about how they view Shedeur Sanders right now. Not as a question mark. Not as a backup plan, but as the foundation. And if they're right, if all these moves come together the way they're hopping, then this offense could look completely different very soon. Because now it's not just about whether Shedeur can step up. It's about what happens when everything around him is built to make sure he does. And this is where things go from interesting to potentially shocking. Because if everything we've talked about actually comes together, the Cleveland Browns might be a lot closer to a breakout than anyone is ready to admit. Right now, the national conversation isn't exactly high on them. There's still doubt, questions about consistency, concerns about whether this team can really compete at a high level, and most of that doubt, it's centered around the quarterback position. But here's the twist. That same uncertainty is exactly what makes this situation dangerous. Because if Shedeur Sanders even hits that baseline we talked about, just solid, steady, efficient quarterback play, that alone could flip the entire outlook of this team. We're not talking about MVP numbers. We're talking about control, rhythm, limiting mistakes. And that's all Cleveland really needs. Because the rest of the roster, it's not empty. There's talent there, pieces that, when put in the right system, can produce. The problem hasn't always been ability, it's been consistency at the most important position on the field. And if that suddenly stabilizes, everything changes. Games that used to slip away become wins, drives that used to stall start finishing. Confidence builds not just in the locker room but across the entire organization. And that's how momentum starts. Now here, where it gets even more interesting. If Shedeur goes beyond that baseline, if he turns those flashes into something consistent, then this doesn't just become a better team. This becomes a problem for the rest of the league. Because teams won't see it coming. Right now, most opponents are preparing for the Browns based on what they've been, not what they could become. And that gap between expectation and reality, that's where teams get caught off guard. We've seen it before. A young quarterback steps in, everything clicks faster than expected, and suddenly a team that was overlooked becomes one nobody wants to face. Now, to be clear, this is still projection. Nothing is guaranteed. There are still plenty of unknowns, and development doesn't always go in a straight line. But the setup, it's there. The opportunity, it's there. And the belief from the organization, that's starting to show more and more. So while some people are still debating whether Shedeur Sanders is ready, others are starting to look at this situation differently. Not as a question mark, but as a potential surprise waiting to happen. And if that surprise hits, it won't just change the Browns' season. It could shift the entire conversation around them overnight. But here, where things get even more interesting, because it's not just about what's happening on the field anymore. It's about how people are reacting to it. And right now, there's a clear divide forming. On one side, you've got the media, analysts, reporters, talking heads, still questioning everything about Shedeur Sanders. Some are downplaying the hype. Others are pushing the idea that the Browns are still uncertain at quarterback. And in some cases, it almost feels like they're waiting for things to go wrong. Now, to be fair, skepticism is normal. That's part of the job. Not every young quarterback works out, and history has proven that over and over again. But hear what fans are starting to notice. The tone. Because it's not just, let's wait and see. It's leaning more toward doubt, toward dismissal. And sometimes it feels like the criticism is coming before the results even have a chance to play out. And that's where the other side comes in. The fans. Because if you look at the fan base right now, especially online, the energy feels completely different. There's excitement, there's belief, and most importantly, there's curiosity about what Shedeur Sanders could become with a full opportunity. You can see it in polls, conversations, comment sections. Whenever the QB1 question comes up, his name keeps rising to the top. In that contrast, it's hard to ignore. On one side, you've got controlled narratives and cautious takes. On the other, you've got raw excitement and growing confidence. And when those two worlds collide, something always happens. The story gets louder. Because now it's not just about performance, it's about perception. It's about who's right, it's about whether the media is missing something or whether the fans are getting ahead of themselves. Now there's also another layer to this. Some fans believe, again, this is speculation, that certain media outlets lean into controversial takes because it drives engagement. The more debate, the more clicks, the more disagreement, the more attention. And if that's even partly true, then this divide might not be closing anytime soon. Because both sides are feeding into it. The media keeps questioning. The fans keep pushing back. And Shedeur Sanders, he's right in the middle of it all. Which makes this situation even more compelling. Because eventually all the talk fades. And when it does, only one thing will matter. What actually happens on the field. And when that moment comes, someone going to be proven right. So when you step back and really look at everything that's happening, it doesn't feel random anymore. It feels like a shift. The Cleveland Browns didn't come out and say, Shedeur Sanders is our QB1. They didn't make a bold announcement or hold a press conference, but they didn't have to. Because the way they've been moving, it already says enough. From the way they're pushing his story to the silence around every other quarterback to the roster moves that seem to align perfectly with a young QB stepping into control, it all points in one direction. Now, to be fair, nothing is officially confirmed, and in the NFL, things can change fast, injuries happen, performances fluctuate, plans get adjusted. But here's the thing. Teams don't accidentally build momentum around a player like this. This feels intentional. And if it is, then Cleveland isn't just preparing for a new starting quarterback. They're preparing for a new identity. Because that's what happens when a franchise fully commits to someone. Everything shifts, the energy changes, the expectations reset, and suddenly the future starts to look very different from the past. Now the big question is simple. Will it work? Because if Shedeur Sanders steps into this role and delivers, even at that baseline level we talked about, then the Browns instantly become a team people have to take seriously. But if he goes beyond that, if he actually reaches that ceiling people have been quietly hinting at, then this won't just be a good move. It'll be a franchise-changing one. And that's what makes this moment so important. Because right now, we're not watching the results yet. We're watching the setup, the build-up, the quiet signals before everything becomes official. And those moments, they matter more than people think. Because once the season starts, all the speculation disappears. All the debates end. All the narratives get tested in real time. And when that happens, there's no hiding from the truth. So now all eyes are on Cleveland. Not just to see who starts at quarterback, but to see if what they've been quietly building behind the scenes is about to turn into something nobody saw coming. Because if it does, this won't just be a storyline. It'll be the beginning of something much bigger.